Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point in life when you realize that no matter how much you give, some people will never truly value you until you're gone. They take you for granted. They assume your kindness is infinite, and they expect you to stay no matter how they treat you. And then, one day, you leave. At first, they act unaffected. They convince themselves that they don't need you. But time has a way of revealing the truth. The silence grows louder. The absence starts to weigh on them, and slowly they begin to suffer, not in ways that they can openly admit, but in the quiet moments when no one is watching. They remember the words they dismissed, the patience they abused, the loyalty they shattered. But here's the thing: regret is a lonely punishment. They may never tell you they miss you. Their pride won't allow it. But deep down they know. They know they lost something they will never find again. And you're no longer there to save them from their own choices. That's not your burden to carry anymore. Instead, you rise, you build, you grow, and as you step into the future, they are left with nothing but echoes of what. Let them suffer in their silence. You've already paid the price. Now it's time to live. The consequences of taking others for granted. People often fail to recognize the value of someone until they are no longer around. It's a common human flaw. We assume that what is present today will still be there tomorrow. We assume that the people who care about us, support us, and stand by us will always do so, no matter how we treat them. But that assumption is dangerous because it blinds us to the reality that relationships, whether personal or professional, are not built on entitlement, but on mutual respect, appreciation, and effort. Imagine a person who has always been there for someone, a friend who listens, a partner who sacrifices, a colleague who supports. At first, their presence is welcomed, their efforts are acknowledged, but over time, familiarity breeds complacency. The gratitude fades. The appreciation turns into expectation. Soon, that person is no longer seen as an individual with needs, emotions, and limits. Instead, they become a given, like the air we breathe, unnoticed until it's gone. When someone is taken for granted, they don't always leave right away. They tolerate, they endure, they give second and third chances. But patience has its limits. And once that limit is reached, once they walk away, the ones who mistreated them are left with nothing but an empty space where loyalty once stood. The reality of their loss doesn't hit immediately. In fact, at first, they might not even notice. They may believe they were right to push that person away. They might even justify their actions. But time has a way of revealing what arrogance tries to ignore. Days pass, then weeks, then months. The absence becomes more noticeable. The support they once had is no longer there. The comfort of knowing someone was always in their corner disappears. And in those quiet moments, regret creeps in. They start to recall the kindness they dismissed, the patience they tested, the understanding they took for granted. But by then it's too late. This is the painful lesson of neglect. The people who give the most are also the ones who, when they finally leave the deepest void. They don't make a scene. They don't seek revenge. They simply remove themselves from a place where they were not valued. And the ones left behind, they suffer, not in loud desperation, but in the silent realization of what they lost. If there's one truth to take from this, it's this: never assume that people will wait forever. Relationships, no matter how strong, require effort. Respect the ones who stand by you before you find yourself standing alone. Because once they leave, all you'll have left is the silence of your own choices. The silent regret of the ones who let you go. Regret is not always loud. It does not always come with apologies, confessions, or grand gestures of reconciliation. More often than not, regret is silent. It is the quiet suffering of those who let go of someone they should have held on to. It lingers in their thoughts, in their late-night reflections, in the empty spaces where you used to be. At first, they may convince themselves that losing you was not a mistake. Pride is a powerful shield, one that blinds people to their own failures. They tell themselves they were right to push you away, to take you for granted, to assume you would always be there. Perhaps they even feel a sense of relief at first, believing that life will continue as it always has. But time does not work that way. Time exposes the truth, and eventually, the weight of their decisions begins to settle in. They start to notice the absence. The little things, your voice, your presence, your support, become undeniable voids in their life. They reach for their phone but stop themselves from sending that message. They remember moments when you were patient, when you were understanding, when you forgave them time and time again, and then they realize you are not coming back. The hardest part of regret is knowing that the door is closed, not because of anger or resentment, but because some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. The ones who let you go must now sit with their choices. They must navigate the consequences of their actions without the person who once stood by them, offering comfort, guidance, and care. You may never hear them say, "I miss you." You may never receive an apology or a moment of closure, but their silence speaks volumes. Regret does not always come with words. Sometimes it is nothing more than a heavy heart, a restless mind, and the quiet suffering of knowing that they lost something they will never have again. Your absence speaks louder than your presence. There is a misconception that in order to make people realize your worth, you must prove yourself, fight for acknowledgement, or demand respect. But the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet certainty that your presence is not meant to be wasted on those who do not value it. When you are constantly available, when you forgive endlessly, when you tolerate more than you should, people begin to believe that you will always be there. They grow accustomed to your kindness. They assume your patience has no limits, and they take your efforts for granted. But the moment you remove yourself, the moment you step back and no longer offer the energy they once relied on, reality hits them in a way that words never could. At first, they may not notice. They may believe your absence is temporary, that you will return just as you always have. But as time passes, the silence grows heavier. The things you used to do for them, listening, supporting, standing by their side, are no longer there. They look around and realize that no one else will tolerate what you did. No one else will offer what you gave so freely. And that is when they truly begin to feel your absence. It is in your absence that they reflect on their actions. It is in your absence that they recognize what they lost. And it is in your absence that they suffer the most. Not because of anger or hatred, but because they finally see the reality they were too blind to acknowledge before. You do not need to argue. You do not need to beg for appreciation. You do not need to lower yourself to prove your worth. Your absence will say everything for you, and by the time they realize what they have lost, you will have already moved on to something greater, something that values you the way you always deserved. Growth through separation. Separation is often seen as loss, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful catalysts for growth. Walking away from those who do not value you is not an act of defeat, it is an act of self-respect, a declaration that you refuse to remain in places that diminish you. The moment you leave behind what no longer serves you, you create space for something better, transformation, healing, and a future free from the weight of people who held you back. At first, it may feel unfamiliar, even painful. You may question your decision, wonder if you should have stayed, if you should have tried harder, but with time you start to see the truth. You were never growing in that environment. You were shrinking to fit the expectations of people who did not appreciate you. You were pouring your energy into relationships that drained you rather than nourished you. And now, without that weight, you can finally expand into the person you were always meant to be. Separation forces you to stand on your own, and in that solitude, you discover your strength. You learn how to rely on yourself, how to build a life that does not depend on validation from those who never truly saw you. You begin to pursue the things that fulfill you, to surround yourself with people who uplift rather than deplete you. Meanwhile, those who lost you remain trapped in the cycle of their own making. They expected you to stay, to keep giving without question. But now, without you, they face the reality they never prepared for, the realization that you were never the problem. And as they sit with that truth, you continue to rise, untouched by the weight of their regret. Separation is not an end, it is a beginning. It is the first step toward a life where you no longer settle for less than what you deserve. And once you embrace that, there is no going back. Let them face the mirror of their actions. One of the hardest things to accept is that you cannot teach someone a lesson they are unwilling to learn. You cannot make them see their mistakes, force them to understand their wrongs, or demand that they appreciate what they once had. Some lessons are only learned through experience, and sometimes the only way for someone to truly understand what they lost is to let them face the mirror of their own actions, alone. When you walk away, you do not need to seek revenge or prove a point. The weight of their choices will catch up with them in time. It may not happen immediately. In fact, they may convince themselves for a while that they were right, that losing you was no great loss. But life has a way of revealing the truth. And eventually they will be forced to confront what they once ignored. They will see the difference between someone who genuinely cared and those who only tolerate them. They will feel the absence of the patience, kindness, and loyalty they took for granted. And most importantly, they will have no one to blame but themselves. This is not about wishing suffering upon them. It is about understanding that consequences are a natural part of life. You are not responsible for their regrets. You are not responsible for their growth. That is their burden to carry, their lesson to learn. Meanwhile, you move forward. You focus on your own journey, your own peace, your own evolution. And as you do, they are left to sit with their silence, their thoughts, and the unmistakable realization that they lost something they will never find again.